everyone. My name is Dr. Christine Crawford, and I'm the Associate Medical Director for NAMI. I'm so happy that you all are able to join us today for another presentation on our Not Alone conversations, in which we have the opportunity to talk to people and to learn about their mental health journeys. And so I am so excited to have here with us today Liz Hernandez. Now, Liz is a big deal. She is an Emmy-nominated television personality and journalist, and she's also the creator of Wordaful, which is a new form of storytelling and allows other people to share their stories with others to connect with people about their experiences. And so thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today.
Dr. Crawford, it is so my pleasure. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Excellent, excellent. So, part of our Not Alone conversations is about talking about people's mental health journeys and what that's been like. And I wonder for you, what has your mental health journey been like?
It has definitely been a journey of self-discovery, a journey of unfamiliarity, where you almost don't recognize yourself. And again, it's just all about self-awareness. I first experienced, I guess if you want to call it, my real bout with anxiety about 6, 7 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with dementia, which would then turn to Alzheimer's. And I had just got hired for a major television network, was taking on a full-time job, was also becoming my mother's caregiver, was also going through just trying to figure out what my positioning was as a daughter who was now faced with the facts that I was going to lose my mother to a disease that was incurable. And so that was when I thought, okay, I need to ask for help. I need to ask for support because I was falling apart. I had lost 10 pounds. My hair was falling out. I was waking up with like stress in my neck, heavy chested. And when you don't have anyone to say, hey, this is going to happen, or this is how you're going to feel, you're just trying to figure it out for yourself. It's like walking in the dark without a flashlight.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And now, fast forward, my mother passed last year. She passed in November 2019, and then we went straight into the pandemic. And so, and again, this is not a woe is me story. This is just simply my story of what it felt like transitioning from losing my mother. And I live in Los Angeles, and Kobe Bryant he was like family to us. So we lost him, and then the pandemic hit, and it's like trying to process all of this. And at the same time, the anxiety of what is happening in the world. So yes, I have definitely I've had to pay attention to what is going on within me, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot. And for it to be a situation in which it was back to back stressful situations, back to back trauma, and to have that all coincide with the pandemic, I mean, I can imagine how overwhelming that must have been for you and to have all of that inside.
And Dr. Crawford, what it allowed me to do as well was also really sit in empathy for other people, because I saw so much of our country just beginning to unravel in the way that people were losing their loved ones and they weren't able to do proper goodbyes, and they weren't able. So when you're sitting in grief, you kind of say, oh my God, I can understand, or oh my, I can relate. But yeah, it's definitely been a process of you have to have a practice. At least for me, that's been what's been my saving grace, is tapping into whether it's gratitude journaling, whether it's meditation, whether it's just prayer, whether it's journaling. It's finding something that grounds me back to just that alone time with myself, that I can process, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling? And how can I help myself?
Mm-hmm. And it's so great that you were able to identify some strategies that helped you cope with all of that trauma and loss. And I wonder, Liz, what tips do you have for other people who may be going through anxiety and trauma, and how is it that they can find strategies to cope?
Well, I think right now more than ever, we're facing burnout where people, we're all still processing the pandemic and it's still in motion. It's still moving around. You know, we go from lockdown to being, let out again. The world starts to open up, to wearing masks, to not wearing masks, to not have any boundaries with our work hours, because a lot of us are working from home. A lot of us have lost someone we love. So I think in being able to realize all of that, it is important for us to have just one practice. We're being fed so much information through social media. Try this, try that, try this. And what I've learned is that just get faithful to one practice that suits you. So I can list off a couple of them, but again, you have to choose what feels right. I gratitude journal every morning. I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. And there is science behind that. It does rewire the brain to help us focus on more things that we're grateful for, as opposed to what we don't have or what we're trying to attain, which can cause anxiety. When we start thinking, I don't have this, I don't have that. But if we place our attention on what we do have and what we can celebrate, a little shift in the mind happens. Quiet time. I know a lot of people, they say it's so hard to meditate. And that is the exact reason why we have to get alone and we have to get quiet, because we live in our phones right now, and living in our phones doesn't allow us to process the whys. Well, why do I feel anxious? Why do I feel sad? You have to do a little bit of investigating. And I feel like the only way to truly do that internal work is to sit alone and kind of just monitor your thoughts and where they go and where they lead you. And journaling can also help with that as well. Maybe you say, well, my mind just won't be quiet. Dump it all out on paper and kind of and look at it. It's a puzzle you almost put together of, okay, I'm feeling this, and you don't judge it, you just let it go. So those are 2 really helpful or 3 really helpful things is gratitude journaling in general, and just quiet time and meditation and prayer. I'm a big fan of prayer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the idea of taking all of these thoughts that you have in your head, all of these worry thoughts that are difficult for you to control, and to be able to put it on a piece of paper gives you a sense of having control over those thoughts, because you're able to see it down on paper, and allows you to do a little bit more processing and to get some more evidence to support whether or not these thoughts are something that should be, one that you should be worried about. Thinking, okay, well, I have these thoughts here, but what is the evidence to support it? And what are the evidence against it? And so just doing that practice of writing things down not only distract yourself from some of these thoughts, but also just gets it out of your head so that you're not overwhelmed and consumed by them. Liz, you said something that was really interesting about how we live in our phones nowadays. And it's so true, especially with social media and people scrolling through their social media, accounts, thinking, okay, well, I should do this form of anxiety management, or I should do meditation. I should do this. I should do that. And that can make them feel overwhelmed too. And so I love this idea of identifying one thing that you could start off with, and to see if that works for you, because it's not a one size fits all approach when it comes to identifying coping strategies. Just find one thing, see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, move on to the next thing.
100%. And, it's kind of that new form of release that we think is helping. Like we will repost what someone has written about self-care, and we think we've done our job for ourselves. We say, oh, they're expressing what I feel, so I'm going to post this. And we think the job is done internally, but it's almost just a quick fix where we have to actually express ourselves, and whether that's allowing just the mind to unwind or putting it out on paper. And that's at least what I've discovered is when I'm able to vocalize, and whether that's even speaking to a mentor, to a friend who's like a safe soundboard, just to get it out. So it's like slowly taking the hamsters off the wheel is so therapeutic.
Absolutely. And, it's clear that you've done a lot of internal work and that you do have
I
supports in place. You try.
try.
I'm curious, Liz, to hear from you. What do you think gets in the way of some people to actually seek out mental health? We know that the stigma is out there. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about those sort of barriers.
I think a lot of it, again, is 50% of it is distraction, is that we think we can cure the problem with our phones. If I just distract myself long enough, we think we can cure the problem with, sitting on Netflix or Amazon Prime or, just in television and watch our favorite show, and our feelings will subside if we ignore them. Um, and sometimes it's even, abusing, whether it's alcohol or anything else. We think like, oh, if I just have a good night out with my girlfriends and I throw back a couple drinks, that's going to eliminate my problems as well. But truly, I believe, when it comes to mental health, we fight it. We don't want to, it's almost like we don't want to believe that it could happen to us. We don't want to believe that it's really an issue. And so we just think if we do these little things, it'll go away. And so I think if we can just understand that mental health is just as important as exercise, is just as important as showering and brushing our teeth, it is a part of us. It's mind, body, soul. It's all connected. And I think if we can really start to appreciate how important it is to take care of our mind and our thoughts, then maybe one, the stigma will go away. And two, people will start actually applying a practice into their lives the same way, we go and we buy our makeup for the salad because we want to be healthier, the same way we sign up for a gym membership. It's the same thing, if not the most important thing, is taking care of our mental health.
Absolutely. And it's so important for people to realize that and to acknowledge that fact. But the reality is, a lot of us have friends and family members who don't understand the importance of mental health. Who, if you were to approach them and say to them, well, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, they may not have the response that's helpful because there's that lack of understanding and appreciation. And so I wonder for you, how have you navigated those conversations in the past when talking to friends or family who didn't really have a full understanding about mental health?
Sure. My dad is old school Latino. He doesn't always have the tools in his tool belt of life to understand that things he struggles with is mental health. So my dad has a really tough issue sleeping at night. He gets really vivid dreams that wake him up. And when you present the word mental health, that sounds something like it's over there. Where when I'm able to explain to him, processing your stress, processing what you feel will then allow you to get a better sleep at night. And so I think sometimes when people hear the word mental health, they think of it as having to be diagnosed with something. They don't understand, like, again, going back to what I was saying, that it's just part of our overall self-care regimen, that it's something that we do daily in a practice, like, whatever that is, eating, exercising. And so when I was able to break it down to my dad, this is part of your mental health because it's in your mind and it's you having to process your emotions, your feelings. Because when you start to talk to an older generation about, again, mental health, they think like, oh no, my dad, I'm too stressed out. I can't talk about mental health. And you're like, that's what mental health is. So I think it's also explaining to people, having to break down, again, in a really simple terms, redefining what mental health is to them in ways that they can understand it. And having to, in a lot of ways, categorize it, whether you suffer from bad temper, look at your mental health. If you're suffering from feeling very emotional, that's mental health. And so I think when you can just take the label away a little bit and more so explain it to someone and how it applies to their life, of taking a look at their behavioral patterns, then they can say, oh, okay, that is me. It's all of us.
Exactly, exactly. Because a lot of people don't realize that there are a number of physical symptoms that one can experience if they have a mental health condition, like anxiety or depression. When we look at the symptoms, it's having poor sleep, not eating well, not being able to function and to focus and concentrate on the things that you need to do. And sometimes, like you said, when we break it down for people, well, I noticed you've lost some weight. I noticed that you're making a lot of mistakes at work. I wonder if this is depression.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it really does click together because some folks have their own preconceived notions of what it means to be anxious or depressed. But helping people to recognize that it's a constellation of symptoms that one can experience when it comes to anxiety and depression can be really helpful.
Yeah. And, you know, as much as I feel that I've tried to educate myself on mental health and self care and self love, just this past week, I didn't realize that I was experiencing true burnout where I, I thought, well, I need a nap because something doesn't feel right. I feel very tired. And when I went to tried to lay down to take a nap, it felt as if I was trying to crawl out of my body. I felt very uncomfortable being in my own skin, and I've never experienced that before. And right away, I called a mentor of mine, and she says, "Oh, honey, that's anxiety." And it was even shocking to me because I thought I knew what was what, but I didn't know the actual physical symptoms because we've just been on fight or flight this whole time. And it was like, okay, that moment to be still. And suddenly I was extremely uncomfortable, but it's beautiful. Again, that's why it's so important to have good support systems around you and just people you can talk to, because you never know who's experienced what in their own lifetime, and they can share that with you and make you feel not alone.
Absolutely. And you talk about support, which is so helpful. And I wonder, what tips do you have if for people who may have friends or family who are going through a mental health condition and it's clear that they need support? How can you be an ally to that person and start the conversation with them?
I think you have to do it very gently and just come from a place of, hey, you know, can we talk? And maybe you first share your own experiences with them and try to pull them in that way, as opposed to saying, hey, I've noticed there's all this stuff, because people are very resistant if they feel like they're being attacked or they feel that they're being accused of, you know, something going on with them. So I feel, again, this is why Wordaful is my pride and joy. And what I really try to share with the community is there's so much power in our storytelling. And when we share our own stories and what we're struggling with, that gives someone else permission to be seen, to be heard, and hopefully a little more understood. And they can then have the vulnerability to say, hey, me too, or hey, I have something similar going on. So I always feel it's a good place to start with yourself and share your struggles. And hopefully they'll be willing to share theirs as well.
Mm-hmm. And so, Liz, I'm so happy that you were willing to share your mental health journey with NAMI today and for all of the listeners and viewers today, because it really is powerful stuff when you are open and honest about what you're going through. Hopefully, that invites others to do the same. And before we close, I just want to know one more thing, Liz. If you had any advice to give to your younger self when it comes to mental health, what advice would you give?
Just be more compassionate with yourself. I think everything starts with our self-love and our compassion. And it's a practice to tame that critical inner voice And just to always remember, I would just say, be your biggest ally. Trust yourself, be good to yourself, talk to yourself lovingly, because that's where, the relationship with ourselves, it affects everything else we do in our life. So if I would have known at a younger age to be a little bit more compassionate, a lot more kinder to myself, yeah, I think that's the advice I would give.
Absolutely. Compassion for ourselves goes a long way, but it often is overlooked and forgotten.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. This was really a lot of fun. Thank you.
Dr. Crawford, thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for this thoughtful interview. And thank you to NAMI for just holding this safe space for us.
Yeah, you're not alone. So thank you.
Thank you.